Good evening, this is Simon from the Parpendit family who are restoring Chance and also Maystar 2. At the moment, it is a bit of a difficult job with both boats because, like most restoration projects, you have to do a lot of dismantling first, which is a very soul destroying job and one that takes more time than many people expect it to. And you often find things you didn't think were there and sometimes major problems with taking bits apart. I found that especially true in the fore cabin of Chance, where lots of bits of boat were nailed on top of each other, and it took an awful lot longer to dismantle. And in some places, it meant destroying quite a bit of wood to get a small piece out. Mainly because it had been nailed on top of other bits which hadn't been taken out beforehand, and some of the bits appeared to be okay, but when it was taken off, the bits of boat below were rotten through being water ingress from the deck, which had been leaking for some time. Also, the galley unit had been messed around with quite a bit over the years, and what used to have a cooker wasn't there any longer. There's a big hole, and for some reason somebody had put a diesel cooker in the boat but destroyed part of the framework for the saloon sideboard and drinks cabinet to put the stove in, which was an oversized diesel cooker, which also they used as essential heating for the boat as well. So it was at this point I decided that if I'm going to do the project, I might as well take as much out of it as possible, look at the plans for the boat, and then put the boat back as it originally was and not as it is now. So therefore, at the moment, I am dismantling all the cabinets in the boat, from the front of the boat to the back, and only leaving in place the transverse bulkhead to give the boat some rigidity, which is what it needs when it comes to moving it. Also, I'm taking the engines out and the fuel tanks and water tanks and all the ballast that can come out, so when it comes to lifting it onto a trailer, the boat will just have its bare bones and not a lot of things else in the boat to cause any more stress to the hull structure, which at the moment is quite weak. There's a fair amount of rot in different places of the boat, but they're isolated in the port bow, the starboard bow, amidships port, and under the stern on the port side and on the starboard side as well. And half the transom is missing, which appears to have been ripped out at some point in the past by a boat builder who gave up on the job and decided he'd had enough. Also, I've looked around the boat, and the fore hatches, or the butterfly hatches on the main saloon, the fore cabin, and in the galley area have been screwed in from below, but unlike some boats I've seen, these hatches are actually sitting directly on the deck beams and carlins and not on top of the deck. So at the moment I've undone all the fixings on the hatches, but I will have to use a sonic saw to cut round all the hatches and the decks to release the hatches from the deck so they can be removed. The two butterfly hatches are in reasonable condition, apart from needing a good scrape and sanding, and the glass removing and new glass fitted, and the stainless steel rods put above the glass to protect them when anybody's working on the deck, like when they change the sails or whatever. Unfortunately, the fore hatch for the fore cabin is completely rotten and will not come out in one piece, unfortunately. So there'll have to be a lot of photographs and measurements taken of this hatch to replicate it back as it was originally. Also, when it comes to the cabin roof in the aft cabin, that will have to come off and get relaid, and a new teak deck laid on top of the original matching board, which is the basis of the deck. So a fair bit of work on the aft deck. Another big job is going to be taking the cabin roof, not the cabin roof, the wheelhouse roof off, because that will be the only way to remove the engines from the boat, because there's no opening in the wheelhouse large enough to put the engines in through. So it's going to be fun in the next few weeks removing the roof on the wheelhouse and removing the engines using a person's crane to lift them out. The engines are very large, but they produce virtually no horsepower. So when it comes to replacing the engines, the new engines are going to be an awful lot smaller, probably twice as much horsepower, but they will be governed down to give us the right speed, hull speed for the boat when it's actually eventually launched and re-rigged as a ketch, which is our final hope for the end of the restoration. On the other boat, Maystar 2, there is a lot of deck work to be done. Also, 2 deck beams have to be replaced. Also, a fair number of ribs in the boat over the port side, forward of the mast, and also 2 or 3 tops of frames which are rotten and will need replacing. Inspecting the port side that is mostly the rot and damages have been sustained. The starboard side, on the other hand, is fairly well sound, and not a great deal would be needed to do to that. However, the wheelhouse area of the cabin roof of the boat will have to be removed and relaid, as will the cabin sides as well have to be repaired and redesigned at the fore end part so that they can be structurally sound again. The cockpit is going to be redesigned to make the use of the small area that there is in the cockpit, but at the same time put as much in there as can be done with such a small area. Also, one of the biggest jobs I'll have to do on her, apart from the decks, the deck beams and the cabin, will have to be the transom, which is rotten and got splits in it in several places, which will need to be removed and remade and refitted, and possibly do a few repairs to the end of the planks which have been scuffed over the years. But it's all going to be fun, and it's going to be a worthwhile project, and it's going to be fun for both myself, my wife and my son, and my brother, who enjoys doing this as well as I do. Thanks for watching. Good night.